Thank you all for joining us. So appreciate it. And as potentially some people continue to come in, what we would love to do to make sure that we're guiding the conversation throughout for everybody. Does everyone see the Q&A or chat function? What we would love to do is if you could just type out and let us know a quick little summary of what job industry you're looking to job search in, what kind of jobs you are looking at specifically. That would be great. Or if you currently are in a role, what you do. That would be very helpful for us. We can make sure that we're guiding this conversation about job searching in a way that is beneficial to everyone. So if you could take a couple moments to do that, that would be wonderful. Okay, perfect. IT program manager, Scrum Master, wonderful. IT leader. Technical leader with focus on process improvement, customer satisfaction, and service management. MS Data Science, background in consulting, wonderful. Marketing and key client management. Cybersecurity, payments industry, wonderful. And you can continue to keep posting them. We just wanted to make sure that we knew who was in the room and we can make sure that the conversation is on point for you all. So I'd love to introduce myself. My name is Maija Ehlinger, and I run classes, workshops, and events at General Assembly. I am so excited. This is our second of third event series with TAG, designed to bring thought leaders together in a virtual setting and help those within the TAG community navigate kind of these unprecedented times and make sure that we can be a resource to you during this time. So we're so excited to present this topic, job searching, and job searching remotely doesn't have to suck. I'm going to let our two fantastic panelists introduce themselves and let you all know their background and why they're here today. Karissa, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, I'm Cassandra Buckner. I am the lead creative recruiter for Synergis Creative. I've been with the company for about 5 years, and I'm into my 7th year of recruiting. I primarily focus on creative, specifically in user experience design, but I also, the other half of our company is in IT, so I'm pretty familiar with, at least high level of what those guys focus on as well. So, I've been working with a lot of candidates across the nation here in Atlanta, where I'm based, and then also in California and New York, and have a lot of insight to share on what that job search looks like across cities and, from the remote perspective. So excited to chat with you guys.
Fantastic.
Hi, everyone. I'm Yvonne Dodd, and I'm the Outcomes Manager and Career Coach at General Assembly Atlanta. And my background is in psychology, nonprofit management, entrepreneurship, and also coaching. So I've been in business for over 7 years as a coaching consultant and with GA for the past year and a half. And all I have done is really help people brand themselves and transition into wherever they're trying to go, be it their new career or their new creative endeavor or making an impact in a certain way. So I know a good bit about the entrepreneurship space and also the technology fields, whether it's data science, UX design, or software engineering, and all about like how to really show up confidently and navigate the job search.
Wonderful. And I'm so excited to hear both of your perspectives because you are both talking with and have so much overlap, but at the same time, I'm really excited to hear about how you address job searching with your clients and with your students a little bit differently. So on that note, let's jump in. Of course, we're here in end of May 2020. the job search looks very different than it did a couple of months ago. Tell me, how are you talking to your clients? How are you talking to your students about the job market and the job search right now? And yeah, Yvonne, if you want to start.
So I think what's really important is one of the most important messages is that we have to focus on the things that we can control. And so being in a job search, if any of you are on this call right now and maybe you were searching already before the pandemic, you may already be familiar with the fact that like applying can seem like you're throwing everything into a black hole, right? And so that part of the uncertainty of a job search hasn't changed. And so focusing on things like, I know that I'm networking, I know I'm engaging on thought leadership on LinkedIn and really like connecting with people and sharing what I'm doing. I know I'm continuing to build my skills in my field. And I know that I am applying, like those things are still the things at least. And so that's one of the things that we've been focused on. And it's now like, no matter when you are doing your job search, humans connecting with humans is one of the most important aspects, and like really engaging with your network and reaching out to people you don't know and really building rapport with folks. That's how a big part of how people get jobs. And virtually, we're finding more and more ways to do that in a way that doesn't completely drain you. So you're not on a bajillion Zoom calls all day, but that's still something that's huge. And then also just adding more skills to your portfolio so that not only is your network strong and you're top of mind for people, but also you've added some more things that might make you a little more attractive as a candidate and stand out just a little more.
Yeah, that's all wonderful advice. I am saying very similar things, honestly. First and foremost, the thing I say is it's slow for everybody. Like it's, not everybody's in the same boat right now. Like there's a lot of competition in the marketplace, but there are still jobs out there. So, it's really about that mindset and that persistence on a personal level of, like Yvonne said, you can only control what you can control. So, continue to apply for those jobs, continue to, make new connections and try to connect with influencers, try to connect with, anybody who's offering any form of resume review or, people at different larger companies I've seen have been offering like 30-minute coffee sessions just to chat about strategy for your next career move. Take advantage of things like that, because even if you come out of it with no new information, you've come at it with a new connection at Google or at Uber or whatever it might be. So leverage that network, and that's really, I think, going to be the way that most people are making their career moves right now is by who they know and how they present themselves well virtually.
That's great advice to know that some things have not changed, even though it feels like everything else in life can be so different right now. That's a good way to think about that. I'm interested of course, both mentioned, things are a little bit slower in the job search right now. Are you seeing any other interesting trends in whether it's if you're working with designers, if you're working with people in tech, any other interesting trends you're seeing right at the moment?
I've seen a lot more engagement on LinkedIn, which is kind of what I was just saying, but that's kind of how everybody is trying to fight through and find that next gig, right? Is trying to leverage a network, trying to build a brand for themselves on the really only social platform that's created for professional connections. So I would say I've seen a lot more activity. I've seen a lot more people using hashtags on LinkedIn now than I did, 6 months ago. So, finding good hashtags is also a really good way to keep on top of hashtag Atlanta jobs or hashtag Seattle jobs or whatever it might be. There might even be hashtag IT jobs. So even that I think has been growing in terms of the way that people are networking with each other. I've also just really loved the support. I've seen a lot of people sharing resources for, new people who are trying to get into this field, or, people who've been affected by layoffs that are specifically in this industry. So, I've seen a lot of that, like collaboration and connectiveness. I think that that's been really inspiring.
Yes, I would agree with that. And I've also seen, to Chris's point about a lot of support, like more people are tackling projects in their volunteer work. More people are, reaching out to their favorite coffee shop owner who might not be open and just saying, hey, I got an idea for your website, or how you can, be better for your users, or something like that. And I feel like things like that are the kinds of things that help you continue to build whatever skills that you have, but also like nurture those relationships, because you never know like what can come of that. And so, yeah, I also think like people being more open to freelance work and contract positions, just seeing a lot more of that. And also if people are, putting out remote positions, some are being a little more flexible on whether or not it's local, and others are like, well, it's remote, but we want you in Pennsylvania. So there's also that happening right now.
Great. And I want to make sure that I'm kind of concisely thinking about everyone that answered our question about what industry they're in and whatnot. And it looks like a lot of people who typed out an answer are in a field and they're thinking about transitioning into another area or industry. Right now, do you have any tips when this job search might be a little bit longer for someone who is potentially making a career change during this time?
I've got a lot of thoughts on this. Okay.
Great. Let's hear them all.
Okay. So firstly, one thing that when you're transitioning between careers is you need to make it very clear at the top of your resume what role you're targeting. So say, you have a background in Scrum management, but you're transitioning over into some other IT field. Forgive me. But for example, you need to be able to say like, I have a background in this, but I'm transitioning into this. Or like for a field I'm more confident in throwing out titles for, I have a background in visual design, but I'm transitioning into user experience design. So making sure to draw out specifically what roles you're targeting is extremely important, because if you just throw out your background, someone's going to say, oh, you're not a good fit for this role, even though that's the type of role you're trying to bust into. You also need to make sure that when you're lining up your resume, you're drawing out in your resume every single thing that you can that's relevant to the role you're applying to. So the point of the resume is not to show a hiring manager all 15 years of your background. It is to show the hiring manager that you have the skills to do the job that you're applying for. So if that looks like dropping off, the first 5 years of your experience and saying additional experience upon request at the bottom of your resume, or if that looks like, dropping out half of your responsibilities that aren't relevant to your new role, that's what's really going to make you stand out as a good fit for the new type of position that you're targeting. And then finally, I would say, try to connect with people who are doing the job that you want to be doing and ask them how they got into that career. I found that most people are super responsive to LinkedIn message, especially if you're saying, hey, I'm looking for a new job. I've been affected by the COVID layoffs, or, I'm trying to transition my career right now. I'm trying to get into what you're doing. How did you get there? Do you have any advice for me? And most people are super, super kind. Not everyone's going to respond, but most people will give you a few minutes of their time and respond back to you. So, Yvonne, do you have other thoughts?
Yes, but 100% to everything you just said. And also, when you're reaching out to people, like make sure that it's obvious that you're trying to build a relationship with them, and not just like, hey, what advice do you have? Right? Like, and then also, I think it's important to, add to what Chris is saying, like, when you're reaching out to people that are in the field you want to be in, look up people that have the same background as you that also transitioned into the field. So if they went from marketing and now they're a software engineer, like, that's already some rapport that you can build on. I would also say that make sure that you're paying attention to the types of skills that are needed for the new positions that you want, and ways that you can show in your previous experience that you had those skills, or ways that you can add to those skills, be it a certification program or something. Just show that you did that continued learning, and even start adding more projects just to show, like, I'm in this, I do this thing. Another thing is, people that are hiring managers and recruiters, they're reading hundreds, I don't know, maybe even thousands of resumes all the time. And so everybody is going to have the same skills, like those same basic skills. And so when it comes to you standing out, it's about, not getting ridiculous on your resume per se, but in your other collateral, maybe your portfolio or your cover letter and things like that, showing your personality a little bit more and not sounding just like another kind of robot just regurgitating industry jargon.
Wonderful. Before we go into kind of these, I want to make sure that we go and do some practical tips and tricks for the job search. But I want to also let everyone know who is on the call, please write questions that you have. I'll be monitoring to answer any. Yes, please type away, and I'll make sure to incorporate them all in. So we've touched on this a little bit, but I definitely want to see if we can bring it all together here. So, of course, the title of this is Job Searching Doesn't Have to Suck. And sometimes it definitely feels it's not the most fun thing to do, as anyone who has done it knows. It can feel like a dread, like you're just kind of getting through the process. And sometimes it doesn't even feel like you're moving in that process. Now, knowing that people on this call might be, applying for the first time in a long time, potentially changing, how do you kind of tackle this behemoth of job searching remotely right now? Do you have, yes, I'll just leave that kind of open.
Okay, so it's like job searching in itself is huge. And so I think breaking it down into smaller chunks is really important. And so if you have a few buckets that you want to tend to in terms of achieving your goal, so that might be, here's my relationship building bucket, here's my skill building and continuing to build my skills bucket, here's me actually applying and engaging, right? Like, and I don't know what the other bucket might be, but dividing things into those categories is important so that you can set goals that are focused on metrics that are achievable, rather than like your goal each day or each week can't be get a job, right? Like, cause that's what it's really all of the mindset stuff that really like either helps you continue your momentum or slows you down during the process. And so knowing like, okay, each week, these are my goals, and what are like the one or two things I can do to just move the needle each day, rather than just get a job, get a lead, right? And then I would also say that making sure that you are not just sitting in front of a computer for 8 hours every day and like doing your job search is crucial. As counterintuitive as it might be to like walk away from the thing in order to come back to it, like you must do that. And you have to do things like take walks and exercise and, breathe and eat food and drink water. As silly as that sounds, like those are the things that will keep your energy up and really keep you interested. And then make sure you're doing things and incorporating things that are actually fun and interesting to you to make it a little less of a drag. And I'll stop there because I know that Chris has plenty to say.
Those are all really awesome thoughts. And, to add in another thought about like doing something that's fun, like, LinkedIn Learning is a great resource. Of course, General Assembly is a great resource. So like throw in learning a new skill or, an hour-long course on something that you've always been curious about. That's always something that's really great. Just, when you're starting a job search, just to kind of brush up on a couple of things that you might not have touched on in a while. Usually when I'm talking to someone who's just starting their job search for the first time in a long time, the first thing I always say is like, take a deep breath. Like, this sucks. I'm so sorry. It sucks that you have to go through it. But like, that's the first thing is like, let it settle, mourn the loss, and like, let's move along. So, make sure that you gather your materials first. That's like super important. It doesn't make sense to start applying to jobs with a resume that's halfway completed. So make sure you get your resume in order. Make sure you get, if you have a portfolio or you want to do a specific cover letter, make sure that you get all of those things in a good presentation mode. And then I honestly think that it's best to start with talking to recruiters who are in the industry that you are in. And talk to former colleagues, talk to people that were in your last company or, 2 companies ago that you still have, a good rapport with, and say, hey, where are you now? Do you mind taking a look at my resume? Does your company have any openings? And at least that way you're starting to get your name out into the community. You're starting to network with people you already have a relationship with and who already know the quality of your work. From a recruiter perspective, like I talk to people all the time who, especially if they're transitioning into a new career, like they don't know what the standard is for the type of resume that is successful in this industry. So, make sure that you're talking to experts that can try to help that transition for you. And then, finally, like just keep going. Like, like Yvonne said, it's a long haul, like it's a long-term game that you're chasing here. So, find small goals that you can set for yourself each day or each week. And, mix them up. Like, one day focus on applying to every single job you can find on LinkedIn and Indeed. The next day work on, connecting and adding and, messaging out to new people who can maybe help network in your career. So just try to keep it fresh and keep coming up with ideas. And when you're stuck, reach out and ask someone for help.
That's great. We have a really good question here, and I'm interested on this too. So we've all been on LinkedIn. We've seen a LinkedIn job post that in a matter of minutes or hours has tons of job applicants already. People have already applied, got 200 people in there. What are the chances of kind of that, if there's 200 people, that, 201st person getting an interview or kind of moving along. So how is that working behind the scenes and what can applicants expect?
That's a really great question. So as someone who receives LinkedIn applications, I will say that I have 2 main comments. The first one is that your application still comes as an email to my inbox, so I will still see it. Secondly, if that posting, say it was just posted 6 hours ago, it could also mean it was just refreshed 6 hours ago. So that posting might have been up for a month and then your poster just reposted it. So it still has 200 applicants that are all old. And now that poster is looking for new applicants. And so they refresh it to bring it back up to the top of the feed or to make you feel like it hasn't been open forever. So still apply. If you're a good candidate, even if I don't reach out to you for this role, I'm going to snag your information and put it into my applicant tracking system, which is what every recruiter uses to keep on top of their candidates. And then also, if they have just reposted it, they are looking for fresh people. So it's definitely still a good thing to apply and get your name in there.
I'm so glad you answered that question because I was really like, yeah, what happens? It's good to get an insider perspective, but also, I recommend reaching out to a human after you've applied to anything. And I'm just curious, Karissa, sorry, Maija,
no, please.
Question. If somebody is like, hey, I just applied to this thing. I'm so interested in it. Here's a project I just did or whatever. What do you think about that tactic?
Oh, absolutely. If you can find the human that is attached to that posting, like I always put my face on it because, people that I work with, consistently can know it's me and feel comfortable reaching out to me. So if you can find the owner of that job posting and reach out to them, they may not respond. And that's just the way it is. Like, especially a corporate recruiter, all they deal with is active applicants. So people coming in and reaching out to them to, pay attention to their specific applicant. So if you reach out though and say like, hey, I'm very excited in this role, or like, here's the specific project that I did that I think is really applicable, or, just give a little bit of flavor beyond that, it may not change your chances of getting an interview for the job, but it might change your chances of sticking in that recruiter's radar, them remembering you, or it'll at least sometimes get you a response. So you can at least get an update on, hey, this role actually closed, or hey, we're in final stages. But if we go through another round of interviews, then yeah, I'll keep you in mind for it. Or you might get a response that's like, hey, we're really looking for someone with 5 to 7 years of experience. You only have 3 years of experience. So unfortunately, it's not a good level match, but at least you get some sort of feedback. And I think I saw another question that asked if you could tell if the role has been reposted. And the answer to that is no, you cannot.
Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know to still apply, because who knows? Maybe it is full of old applicants. I'm interested in terms of, we're in this new world where people are working from home. More companies are transitioning to working from home in a longer term, or even indefinitely. We're hearing some companies saying is going to be a new policy. For people that are looking and job searching, is this a time, do you recommend expanding your geographic search, or how do you go about this now, knowing that in certain cases, geography might not be a hindrance to any job search?
Go ahead.
Okay. So that's a great question. I do work kind of nationally, so I work with a lot of people that are looking to relocate or who are open to relocation. One thing about applying outside of the area that you're in is that if you're not willing to relocate, you need to make sure that at the top of your resume, it says like the city that you're in and open to remote roles only. So, because the best way to do that is just to apply to different companies, especially if it says that they're open to remote. Obviously that's a pretty good freebie of like open remote position, apply here. But some companies are open to 100% remote and they don't advertise that. So, in some cases, the best thing you can do is to apply to the job, indicate to the recruiter, whoever's reviewing your resume, that you're open to working with that role remotely. But now is actually a really great time to explore other markets, especially if you've been considering relocation. Start exploring the job market now while you can work remotely, because most companies right now are saying, hey, let's hire 100% remotely, get them started remotely, and then we're going to worry about getting you on site in a couple of months or early next year. And then, we can worry about relocating you at that point. So it's a really great time to open up and explore if you're open to it.
Yes, 100%. And I think the main thing I would add is like communication. Like, make sure you're letting people know up front where you stand. No sneaky business. That's
a very good point. This is another great question. I know all of us, the dreaded cover letter. How important is the cover letter? How do you differentiate it from your resume, and how long should it be?
So if you're applying to a job through a recruiter, like through an agency recruiter, not through a corporate recruiter, if you're applying for a job through an agency recruiter, you do not need a cover letter, because the recruiter and their relationship with that client is your cover letter. If sometimes you'll apply to a job online and it requires a cover letter. So for those cases, you definitely need one. So it doesn't need to be super long. I would say the longer it is, the less likely it is that I'm going to make it all the way through it. So stick to one page at most, and even with that one page, you should have some sort of a header, some sort of a footer, and, content in between. So maybe 2 to 3 paragraphs. And it should really describe more about who you are as a human, what your passions are, and then potentially draw out one specific project that's really in line with the role that you're applying to. That may not necessarily be on your resume. So, of course, you can start with generic. I have 15 years of experience in this type of industry. I've worked with these type of companies, but you don't want to spend too much time on that because you can see that on your resume. So draw out what really drives you, what really motivates you to do an excellent job, and why you're interested in the role that you're applying to, what you admire about that company. Draw out things like that to show you've done your homework.
Yes. And I think I liken the cover letter to like a spare tire, because like you're really glad that you have it when you have it. Right. And it's a little tough because you might, pour your heart out and spend all this time writing it. And maybe one person out of the 5 people that interview you read it. But the thing is, it can make all the difference. And I'm so glad that you said that, Karissa, because a lot of people are still writing those, "Dear Sir" or "Madam, I am this." And you want to help people read in between the lines of your resume and not regurgitate it. And yeah, as painful as it is, just go ahead and have one. And maybe you can start a template from there. So it's not as hard to write the other ones, but it can make a difference.
Great. And now, Karissa, you mentioned, if you're working with a recruiter, the recruiter is your cover letter. Could you kind of walk us through how working with a recruiter works and how do you get that process started, and who would be a good candidate to, how do you know you're ready to work with a recruiter?
Oh, yeah, those are great questions. So working with an agency recruiter is a little bit different than working with a corporate recruiter. So the way that a corporate recruiter works is they work for XYZ big company, and they have applications coming in through that company's website or through LinkedIn all day, every day. So they're only working with people that they know are active and interested in their roles. They might also not really specialize in a specific industry. So you might be, an IT specialist with 20 years of experience, and you're exactly the right fit for this role, but they've never really worked on IT roles before, so they can't really make the connection. So a lot of times the recruiters in corporate don't focus on that industry, and they're just kind of meant to know a little bit of everything to try to get good candidates through. So when you're working with more of an agency recruiters are focused on industry. So my company, Synergis, we have 2 divisions. We have an IT division, and we have one IT recruiter we have a couple, but we have 2 or 3 IT recruiters that focus on applications development. And then we have a creative house, and we have 2 recruiters that focus on UX design and research. We have a different recruiter that focuses on creative program management. So they really can get down and dirty in the details of what those skill sets are. So it's really helpful to connect with agency recruiters because they know exactly what your resume and portfolio should look like for the industry that you're going into. So anybody can work with an agency recruiter. I will talk to anybody that reaches out to me, especially if they're in that creative field, to give them whatever insight that I can. I may not be able to help all of them, but I'm happy to connect and share whatever advice I can, answer questions for them. So, you're ready to work with a recruiter whenever you're ready to look for a job. Just know that a lot of agency recruiters will work more on contract positions, or some will work on only full-time roles, or some will work on a mix of both. So just make sure you kind of understand what the makeup of their business looks like. And then I usually look on LinkedIn, honestly, just to connect with recruiters. You can do a quick search for UX recruiter or for IT recruiter and find, recruiters with that type of title. Do some do some research on the company, do some research on them, like read through their profile, see what they have to say about themselves, see how long they've been with the company, because a lot of times longevity is really a good indicator of, how well the company treats their own employees. Because a lot of agency environments are turn and burn. So if you see a lot of people going through that company that are only there for a year or two, then that may not be the best, recruiting agency to work with. But so hopefully that answered most of those questions. Were there others that I missed?
Oh, that was great. I think that's helpful too, to understand what kind of how an agency works and what you kind of look for. That's very helpful. We do have two questions about the getting your resume through an applicant tracking system. I know that now, you're one of 1,000, feels like a lot of times. I think we've kind of touched on a couple of these tips and tricks, but how do you stand out when you're just submitting a resume?
So there are a few programs like JobScan. I think it's jobscan.co, and also another one called ResRunner, REZ. And so it's helpful because you can put a job description with it, and you can see like, okay, I've got the keywords. I would say getting like a 60 to 70% match is good, maybe not 100%, because then your resume starts sounding a little weird. But it really helps you understand things like Karissa mentioned earlier, like maybe, you're switching careers and you were a visual designer before, or you were a digital marketer before, and now you're trying to get into something else, and it'll tell you what kind of resume you sound like and what kind of role you actually sound like based on what's on your resume. And I think there's the actual keyword part of it. And then there's also the design of your resume. So you want to make sure that it doesn't have like really interesting fonts, or, just small things in the templates and the formatting. So like, you may think your resume is so beautiful, but it could immediately just get kicked out of the ATS scanner system. And so that's another thing to consider. And websites like JobScan have ATS friendly resume templates that you can download for free.
I would also add that you want to make sure ultimately that even though you're trying to get through an ATS, that at the end game is still for your resume to be viewed by a human. So like Yvonne said, you want it to still look good and presentable. One piece of advice that I've been giving to people recently is like, especially right now, since everything is remote, your resume is going to be viewed on a screen. So it's probably time to walk away from your serif font, put Times New Roman to bed, and find a clean UI font to use. That's going to really make a difference. Also, in terms of getting through an ATS, don't send an image. I see a lot of people that try to send a picture of a resume, and it's just not going to work. It will not work. Don't try to do it. Send a Word document or send a PDF. PDF is the most professional. That's going to ensure that gets through exactly as you formatted it, exactly the font you used. And you literally can just save your Word document as a PDF. But ultimately, if you send a PDF or a Word doc, either of those are good. And then, trying to get through some of the ATS nonsense. Most of them are pretty good. Most of them will accept a resume, even if they don't think it's a good fit. But, and that'll still put you into the ATS, and then it's up to the recruiter to make sure that they're labeling you appropriately to find you again. So, I think that's it.
Great. Now, let's say you've gotten an interview, you're planning a phone call. Great, you've made it through this terrible ATS system, and you've landed, your first step in. Talking about potential layoffs in the past, that can be a difficult conversation. Do you have any tips about, whether you were impacted by COVID layoffs or any other sort of layoff? How do you bring that up? How do you talk about that in during your job search?
I mean, I think it's just a natural part of life. Like it's not something you can always affect. Like nobody in July of last year would have ever predicted that we were all going to be working remotely come May 2020. So I think that bringing it up just kind of on your own naturally as part of the conversation, like as part of your elevator pitch is totally fine. Like, hey, I was working with this really great company. I got these really great experiences. I learned this thing and this thing, or I was able to do this thing and lead this team. And unfortunately, I was let go because of, COVID layoff that affected my entire organization or that affected my entire team. Just being upfront about it, letting them know what the issue was or like what the cause was is much better than not saying anything. And if it maybe doesn't come up, then they still have that question of, were you just fired because you're bad at your job, or were you affected in a larger economic downswing, something like that. So it's always better, in my opinion, just to bring it up yourself, make it part of your pitch. And that way it's not awkward. And that way it's very, very natural.
And I also want to add to that, because I think that if you do not practice this answer, it will be very obvious, like how uncomfortable you are with it. And that could be worse, especially if you are doing your interview remotely and we're on, like, you already have to like think about all these other things now because you're like staring at your camera instead of yourself or the person, whatever. And so, practicing these kinds of answers that you are most uncomfortable with, you can actually focus on relaxing rather than what are you going to say, or you can focus on, diminishing any weird tics you may have and things like that.
Which brings up a good point. How do you prepare for a remote interview in these days? Do you anything that you're letting people know, things they should keep in mind as they're entering a Zoom room?
Yes, lots. So I think, maybe by now we all may generally have an understanding of certain things, like put yourself on mute. Like I have a 2-year-old in the background right now, right? So like I got to make sure that the background noise is a minimum, but also it's key to invest, and it doesn't have to be expensive, but like make sure you have a lamp for good lighting, or, actually get appropriately dressed. Please wear pants. And also focus on like practice doing things like being energetic and smiling. Just because you have to do it, you have to take it up just a little bit of a notch in order to not sound monotone. So even like sitting on the edge of your seat, making sure you're standing up straight, and things like that can make all of the difference. If you can get, I have some people that they got the podcast mic and they've got like all this fancy lighting and things like that. You don't have to do that. But if that's your jam, like that'll definitely set you apart.
Yeah, a lot of the way that I prepare people is by telling them a story that I had a candidate interview many years ago. And the interviewer cut the candidate's interview short by about 40 minutes. And so the candidate called me and was like, that was so unprofessional. I can't believe that they did that. And then the client called me and said he was wearing an Auburn hoodie and had a collection of Jägermeister bottles behind him. So don't do that. That's that's the gist of the story, is be in a professional, neutral setting where, like your actual work clothes when you're doing an interview. Look at the camera, not at the screen. And, make sure that you are in a more of a quiet environment. Test your stuff before you get in there. So like make sure your mic's working, make sure your camera turns on. Do you have a lamp next to you that can kind of throw some light on your face, and just remember that you're still talking to a human at the end of the day. There's a screen between you, but it's still supposed to be a good, conversation with where you're connecting with another person.
Great. And, we have another question. I want to jump back to you, Karissa, in terms of do you have any things that you could say people should avoid, any mistakes you've seen that people make when they're working with a recruiter?
Yeah, that's a really good question. When you're working with a recruiter, got to remember that it's a free service for candidates. So everything that I do to spend time with you and to help you with your resume and to help you with, putting you in front of clients, I only get paid if I actually place you somewhere. So while I love doing that and I love working with candidates and like that's the best part of my day, at the end of the day, like my job is actually to fill the client's role, not to place candidates in positions. So if I don't have roles that match your background right now, I may not necessarily go out and look for a job for you, because what I'm focused on is looking for a person to fill the client's job. So that's why when you're working with recruiters, it's great for you to work with multiple recruiters at once. The main thing is just to be open and honest with all of them. So like if one of them says, hey, I have this great opportunity with XYZ company, if you've already applied there, you should definitely say, I've already applied, I'm working with another agency, please don't submit me there. So just make sure that you're open and honest with both or all recruiters that you're working with, so you're not getting double submitted. But make sure that you're working with enough people that you can get your information in front of as many companies as possible, because I may not work with the same companies that, the other person you're working with works with. So it's really helpful to work with multiple recruiters. Don't think that I'm going to be the one magic person that can get you a job. Maybe I can, and that would be awesome, but maybe I can't. And it's good to have those other relationships. Another thing that I see is, following up too much or not following up enough. So, a lot of times, like, I run a pipeline of 50 to 100 people for six different pipelines across the US. So, I have a lot of people that I'm actively working with. So, if you are the best fit for my role, hopefully I'm going to remember that and find you. But, if you're actively looking for a job, it's great for you to check in with me once a week or every other week, especially as you make updates to your resume or add new projects to your portfolio. Or if there's, I have one person that I work with where she told me about a company that she's interviewing with. I'm not working with them, but she wanted me to take a look at the project that she was trying to do for them. And I was happy to do that. So, it's just a relationship, and make sure that it's running both ways. But if you reach out to me, 2 or 3 times a day about the same role, I'm probably not going to want to work with you very much in the future, because I don't get updates that frequently. So, keep it to, once a week, every 5 days, every 2 weeks, just keep it casual. But, make sure that you're actively checking in as well.
Great. And another question that in that vein that came in, is there a way that someone knows where their resume went when what companies you've sent it to? Is that something that you keep track of for them?
Absolutely. I keep track of that's part of working with an ATS. So I keep track of each company, each hiring manager that I've sent a specific candidate's information to. And any recruiter that you want to be working with is going to make sure that they get your permission before sending your information to any client. So if you're working with someone who's sending your information without your permission, that's not a good recruiter to work with. So before reaching out to, or before submitting your information, I'm going to reach out and get your permission, because it makes you look bad if multiple recruiters are submitting your information. So you just want to make sure that you're working with the right person there.
Great. Let's see. I want to make sure that I'm getting all these questions that are coming in. Oh, interesting. So yeah, we have had a couple of questions come in, COVID related, specifically in terms of what does that look like, transitioning back into offices, and how do you kind of bring up that subject to a potential employer if you have questions about their health and safety standards or how their office will look in the future. When should you be bringing up those conversations during your job search and conversations?
So if you're working with a recruiter, an agency recruiter, or a remote, or a corporate recruiter, hopefully, they should be able to tell you some of that information. So that way you're not necessarily having to wait to ask when you're in an interview, because you want your interview time spent on why I'm a good match for this role and making sure that the company is a good match for you. So hopefully your recruiter will have information like that. Like for the moment, most of my clients are saying, we're doing a remote start. We're not planning to be back in office until January. And for the moment, that's pretty good for most people. Like, okay, great, we'll worry about that later. But if you are in an industry where you're going to have to be in office sooner rather than later, or you can't sustain remote work for that long, and your recruiter does not know the answer to that question, it's completely fine to bring that up in an interview. And I would say it's probably okay to bring that up in even a first or second round interview. Most of the time an interviewer will give you a chance at the end to ask questions. That could be a question you ask, just like, hey, what's your typical office environment like? And when are you guys anticipating starting to transition back into the office? And, a lot of times that's a great way to ask that question, is just, what is your typical office culture like when you are in the office? Oh, and hey, by the way, what does that transition plan actually look like? And then from there, hopefully you can ask a few other questions if they don't get hit on, like, are they planning to do any sort of sanitizing stations? Approach it more out of curiosity, as opposed to, well, I need these 3 or 4 things before, to check the boxes before I can say I'm interested. So, just make it part of the conversation, and don't be like too shy about it.
That makes sense. Yes, asking in a curious fashion is always a good way to suss out what might be. I want to be cautious of time here, but I think this is a great question. I think we've all seen where you go on LinkedIn and you see one job posting and you apply, and you then log on to Indeed and you see the same one and you see it on then that company's website. Should you be applying in all of those places? How does that process kind of work?
That's a good question. Within my company, I will say if we have multiple people working on it, then like I might post it on one place, like at LinkedIn, and a colleague might post it on Indeed. So if you see a job posting in 2 places from an agency, like a Synergis, I would not recommend applying to both, because if you're applying to both, then you're just creating double work for one recruiter. Or if you're applying to both, then now you've created like a candidate issue where we have to figure out who's going to be the one to work with you. I would imagine that the same is true for larger corporations or, companies that you're applying to. If they've applied or if they've put the position on multiple job boards, I wouldn't imagine that it's necessary for you to apply to each position listed. If you don't hear back from, like, say you apply on LinkedIn and then see it posted later on Indeed, one thing you could do is try to reach out to the person who posted it on LinkedIn and say, hey, I saw that there was another position on Indeed. Send them the specific link to the position on Indeed and say, is this the same job, or could I apply to it on Indeed as well? And just ask for information. But ultimately, I would say you probably don't need to apply to it in both places.
Okay, that's. Oh, sorry, Yvonne.
I was just gonna say, like, I've heard like it's going to one inbox when it's like a corporate company posting it on a bunch of different things, so you don't have to worry as much. It's going to get to the person.
Great. Well, we've just got a couple of minutes, and I want to make sure that we've gone into the nitty-gritty in certain places, and I wanted to kind of end by taking a step back. And if you had like one piece of advice for people who are in the job search, how do they stay energized? How do they stay focused and excited about the job search? What would you tell them?
Take some time to really go back to why you are doing it and the kind of life you imagine creating for yourself after you've accomplished your goal. That has to be your carrot on the stick.
Yeah, I agree. I think that for me, I think it's more about remembering why you do what you do. Thinking about the fact that like ultimately you want to give your family a good life, or you want to, you have certain career goals that you're trying to hit, and just keeping those things top of mind. And even if that looks like putting a picture of your family on your desk next to your computer where you're job searching every day, just to remember, like, that's the kid that I'm doing this for. Keep yourself motivated that way, by remembering the life that you're living, and the life that you're trying to support, and not the other way around.
Yeah, anything to just help you remember that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Like this is not forever.
Great. Well, I want to give a huge virtual round of applause and thank you to both of you for your insight on this very important topic. And I'm so excited that we were able to bring this together with GA and with TAG. Again, this is our second in our three-part series. We'll have another one in 2 weeks that I'm very excited about, specifically about public speaking in a remote setting. So I hope you all can join us for that one as well. And please, reach out to us. I'm sure Karissa's inbox is going to be you'll be full. And so thank you so much for everyone for attending. And we wish you the best of luck on your job search moving forward, and enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.